Hard to believe it was some 30 years ago when the USA took on Trinidad and Tobago with so much at stake. Remember, those countries are playing for a final spot in the 1990 World Cup. A beautiful Sunday afternoon in Port of Spain. Pressure on both teams, right? USA had not qualified for a World Cup since 1950. They had to win the game because of previous results, so a draw wouldn't be enough for them. They also knew at that time that they'd host the 1994 World Cup, so that would mean 2 consecutive World Cups for the U.S. For Trinidad and Tobago, at that time, they had never qualified for a World Cup, and this was their best chance. A draw at home would do it. They had home field advantage, but they also had that pressure, and their government had declared the following Monday, the day after the game, a national holiday. Win, lose, or draw. Some 30 years ago, there was no MLS, really no full-time professional first division soccer in the U.S. So our head coach, Bob Gansler, who I think never got enough credit for the job he did, had to make do with college and semi-pro players.
Tony recently honored by being named the Herman Trophy winner this year. First time a goalkeeper has won that award.
Names that we, I think, know more now: John Harkes, Tony Meola, Tab Ramos, Peter Vermees, and Paul Caligiuri. A couple of days, I guess it was, before the game, we came in on a commercial flight. Fans could greet you at the airport, and they certainly did. Trinidad and Tobago fans came in numbers, loud and strong, and we did hear some positive chants and songs all about their country, but we also heard very clearly and very loudly the chant of "Go Home, USA." And while I never thought it was a hostile environment, even there at the airport, I did find it very passionate and very impressive. The day before the game, going over to the stadium, and on the ride over, I saw something very different for me. I saw cars that you could tell were painted red. I actually saw houses that were painted red. Come game time, as expected, people's faces, much like a college basketball game, included red, as did the clothing that they wore to the game. So there was no mistaking the fact that red was their color, and red was going to be popular on that day.
Tell you what, it seemed like there was a mandatory sign that said you must wear red or you wouldn't be allowed to enter the stadium, because that's all you see here. It's just a sea of red.
So I think back to our production meeting the day before the game, when our producer normally tells us what time to meet before kickoff, and he said, "I'm going to tell you something that you guys are not going to want to hear. I'm going to need you there about 4 hours before kickoff." I thought, that's incredible. Like, going from 90 minutes to maybe 4 hours. And I said, "What are Seamus and I going to do for 4 hours?" He said, "I know it's crazy. It's up to you." He said, "If you want to call the game, if you want to be guaranteed that you can call the game, show up around noon." This, at that time, is probably going to be the game of my life at that point, you know, with all that was at stake. So I was never going to risk not being able to call it. It was a 25,000-seat stadium, sold out in about an hour, but estimates on that day ranged from 30 to 40,000 people in that stadium. We were later told that there were approximately 5,000 counterfeit tickets out there. It was a sea of red, all with the exception of about 2 rows of USA supporters and officials. We listened and we watched the constant singing and dancing, because it never stopped from the Trinidad and Tobago supporters. Seamus and I needed to go down to the field to record an open. And Charlie Slagle was with us. There were people, fans, sitting in the aisle. Were it not for Charlie, I don't think I would have ever been able to make it to the field, because there was really no way to get there. We always joked about that for many years after that. I think I remember Caligiuri's goal more from watching it so many times over the years, whenever there was an anniversary, whenever somebody mentioned something about Paul.
To Caligiuri. Beats the first man. A left-footed shot. Paul Caligiuri has scored a goal. The USA lead 1-0.
Caught everyone off guard. Fans, announcers, Trinidad and Tobago's goalkeeper. And at that time, nobody knew whether that goal was going to be the goal of record, because all Trinidad and Tobago needed was a draw. We called it later the shot heard around the world.
That might be the shot heard around the world. Paul Caligiuri, who was not...
Later, I called it the billion-dollar goal. It got us as a country to the World Cup for the first time in 40 years. And we never missed a World Cup after that until, unfortunately, 2018. So all those World Cups, all those sponsors, all that television revenue, all of the tickets that were sold, the startup and the evolution of Major League Soccer to a point where at some point soon we're going to have 30 teams. And new franchises are paying $200, $250, $300 million. All of these new stadiums, so much stuff. If you put a price tag on it, I think it was more than the shot heard around the world. I think it was the billion-dollar goal, if you will.
Goal from Tab Ramos at the 31st minute are trying to hold on and go to Italy, and they do! The USA has realized a dream. They will qualify for the World Cup.
I had thought the day before, what would I say? And I think it's the last time I've ever thought about this, by the way. I thought about what would I say if the U.S. qualified for the World Cup? And I thought about saying, just for like 5 seconds, something like Andiamo Italia, which I think translated into we're going to Italy. But I never used it. I thought it's too corny. It's not going to work. Seamus Mallon says on air, which was, I thought, a fantastic line, he said, "Where's Al Michaels when you really need him?"
Where is Al Michaels when we need him?
Well, he already used the best line of the decade.
Incredible.
I'm glad I didn't say Andiamo Italia because I think it would have been so corny. It may not be the best game I've ever called or the game that is the most important that I've ever called, but I think it's one of 2 or 3 of the most memorable games that I've been at, and mostly because of what it meant and the atmosphere surrounding it.